tweet it out and get ready to roll. Oh, I feel afraid.
Hmm.
All right, there's the link to that. Tweet, blue sky, this, and record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawk Fanatic Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. It is Thursday, January the 30th, a little after 9:30 a.m. Apologies for the late start. I was catching Scott up on my personal and professional life, a lot going on there. I kind of referred to that a little bit on Tuesday on the Mailbag podcast, getting closer to letting you guys know kind of what's going on there. But there will be some changes in my professional life, but you'll still be able to find me. And I plan to still be doing these podcasts. So I will be able to explain to you what's going on. Scott knows, but he's not allowed to tell.
No.
Um, we're going to talk some Hawkeyes, hoops, a little wrestling, some football recruiting. Scott did research on what more about the Caitlin Clark effect. We'll get into that a little bit and tie that into the women's basketball discussion. But where the hell did January go, Scott? I can't believe it's almost February.
I January is the longest and the shortest month. Well, it's the longest month for sure. But when it's at the end, you're like, oh, where did it go? But
What did I
I don't know.
do?
I hate January. I mean, other than the NFL playoffs and I guess CFP now, but it's long, it's yucky, although the weather hasn't been that bad, but I
Yeah,
don't know. But Groundhog Day is kind of, for me, I always look at Groundhog Day as this is the time you can, when you hit Groundhog Day, that's the time you can start to talk about March Madness. Because when you start to do it before, it's like September bowl projections. It's like, nah,
yeah.
there's still a lot of season to figure out. But once you hit that, then you can start looking ahead. All right, these are how the teams kind of shape up, and who could, your bracketologies and whatever. So we're almost there. We're only a couple of days away from that.
Let's jump into that and start with the story you had at the Athletic on Caitlin Clark's impact and other people. I mean,
Yeah.
she's the main driving force, but obviously it was a show like the Beatles traveling the country. But Scott's got the numbers on the impact this past season, not the season we're in. What ticket sales were with games that she played in. We'll say that.
Yeah. Iowa's home. We all knew, we all saw, hey, it was first team ever to sell out at home. We knew it was going to be good numbers, and it was. Iowa last year made $3.2 million in ticket sales at Carver Hawkeye Arena, which was by far the most for a women's basketball program in Big Ten history. And I don't know where that stacks up nationally. I don't know if UConn had ever done more, or Tennessee or South Carolina. I don't know that, and I'm not. If
Yeah,
I
you
wanted
would
to,
probably have to like measure it against like the economy at that time. It's hard to do, but I got to think
yeah.
that number's right there with anybody.
Exactly. So, and it was for the first time, clearly more than what the men had made, $2.9 million in ticket sales. So that's a historical marker. It shows the popularity of the women's program, and B, what we know is kind of the decline of the men's, because the year before the men made 3.4 million and now they made 2.9. So it's historic in its own right. But then I have almost all of the numbers for the Big Ten, at least the public schools. I'm missing two more that Iowa played on the road. But out of the six opponents that they faced on the road, they made a combined $1.5 million more in ticket sales year over year. And you've got to think that there's a strong correlation there between
Yeah.
hosting, Iowa and not, because every single one of her road games was sold out.
And we
And
saw it, people lining up outside of the arenas for hours. I mean, it's not surprising. It's
exactly.
it's cool to see these to hear the numbers though and see how what the financial impact was.
Right. And the others would be, Northwestern, which we won't get,
Yeah.
um, Indiana, which was strong, and then Rutgers, which was sold out, which it had to be strong too, because it wasn't strong before.
Yeah.
But like some of them were marginal. Nebraska, for instance, was about 66,000 more. That's probably not as much to do to Caitlin Clark, because they played them the year before and had a really strong crowd, as it was just the program got a little bit better. But like Ohio State, which was a $400,000 jump and had a sellout, and in a Sunday afternoon game on NBC, that's due to the Caitlin Clark effect. So this was it is interesting to see just how popular it was, how much it enriched Iowa. I mean, Iowa budgeted, I think it was 1.3 million or 1.1 million for tickets for the women. They always budget conservatively when it comes to ticket sales, and then that way they're not surprised in a negative way, although they were with the men actually. And so it jumped up significantly from their final numbers. And then this year, I think they budgeted maybe 1.5, but it's all sold out again.
Mhm.
So the numbers may be even better, because I know there was a ticket increase. So I think it shows the health, the financial health, the popularity of it. I had a couple of people come, which I expected, to say, well, they still lost a lot of money. And that is true, because of media rights contracts, which are archaic at that level. We saw it. I mean, there were 4 million more viewers watching the women's championship than the men's championship last year. And that included two fairly popular teams at UConn and Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
But there are 4 million more viewers, yet the contract is so far behind that it doesn't catch up, which is why women's basketball loses money. And that's why the men made about $2.5 million, which isn't very much, because they have almost $6 million tied up in media rights and NCAA units. So that's, but still, I think when you take it for what it is, that's a major milestone for women's basketball.
Yeah, and that's just the impact on ticket sales, the merchandise and concessions. I mean, it's the impact, and we're seeing it now too. We're seeing it on the professional level, and the impact she has, and hanging out with Taylor Swift, and she's global, and we got to see it come through here, and that's pretty cool. And the question now is, what is the post Caitlin era like? And this is the first chapter of that this season, and it's been up and down. I think that's fair to say. It's been kind of a roller coaster, not unexpected.
Yeah.
Lost a ton from last year. New head coach, new assistant coach. Just different vibe, different players, freshmen. One of your best players a transfer. All those things. It was going to take some time. And we've said this throughout this month of January. The time is now. For both men and women, and we're focused on the women in the first part of this conversation, are 4-6 in the league, and got work to do. But the good news, Scott, and we'll again stay with the Iowa women, they have opportunities in a great league with really good teams to get resume building wins, and that starts on Sunday.
Yeah,
Juju Watkins and USC coming to Carver should be an incredible, with Caitlin Clark's jersey being retired after that, and the recruits including Addie Deal, and that environment, you're not going to get more of a support and a benefit against a great team than they will on Sunday. This is the opportunity that they have to seize. And even if they don't, just show that you're on that type of level. And that can help your resume too. Not as much, but at least if you're on that bubble, that people could say, well, look what they did against USC. They almost got it.
Yeah. I think this is as important of a game as there is. And it's not about winning, it's about performance. Because, whether it's the Post, who I can never pronounce her name correctly, or Juju Watkins, USC has an elite team. This is a team that's Final Four capable, potentially national championship ability.
They are what you were last year.
Right. This is an elite team. This is a team capable of winning a championship both in the Big Ten and the NCAA. that's going to be tough to beat. But upsets happen. Ohio State got upset. You have other teams that get upset from time to time, and Iowa has the machine, which is the fan base that's loyal and is rabid and is going to be out in full force, which means that if there's any pressure that they feel, it's to perform well. If they lose 80-71, but they play hard and it's just one of those games that just you don't have the horses, there's no shame in that. You're not good enough, but you played hard, you played well. No moral victories, but you'd want to show out. But if it's 85-59 and you have 26 turnovers and you lose by 26, then that's where the spotlight and the intensity of the fans are going to come out a little bit stronger against you. And so I think this is an important game. Hannah Stolke's back. She had a great game the other day against Northwestern.
What'd you take out of that game?
I'll say this. I think Northwestern played its best game.
Well, they 9 of 15 from three. They were unusually accurate from behind the arc, and that can keep you in a game.
Right. And this is the Iowa factor that hurts it, is they are going to get everybody's best shot because of what they've accomplished. They're still on the floor. And if you're Northwestern and you're going in that game 0-7, and you think, man, we got a shot. Let's go out. Let's go out and play hard. And then you're winning and you're competing and you're feeling good about yourself. I mean, that's a feather in their season. I mean, that's a feather in their cap. That's like, hey, we got Iowa on the road, because they know that's not going to happen with regularity. And so they got Northwestern's best shot. And I thought they were able to respond. It wasn't the perfect game. It wasn't even really a good game for them, but they scored enough. They played better on offense than they had in a while. And, Hannah Stolke played really well for the most part. Still some inconsistencies, but it did hit some threes. And I just think that, it's not what you would have wanted, but I don't think it was certainly bad at all.
Yeah, the bad would have been had they lost that. That would have been, I don't want to say catastrophic, but that would have been just a wart on your resume that would not go away. What's the stuff they put on warts? Compound W? Yeah, that ain't working.
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is go to the doctor's office and get it frozen off type of thing. But yeah, I mean, and it would have they wouldn't have gone to the tournament if they were lost to Northwestern. I mean, they're bubblelicious right now. So it could pop or it could go, but that one would have cost them just that dearly. I mean, because the one thing they've got going for them is they got a good net. They're in a great league. They're going to have a losing record in the league, but they play enough good competition that their wins, if they get any good wins, will really help them. The losses really won't kill them if they lose to teams in their neighborhood or beyond. But that was one where, you lose to somebody that's beneath you, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, looking at the net this morning, Scott, USC is 5th. Going through Big Ten, Ohio State 14, Michigan State 16, Maryland 24, Minnesota 28, Michigan 30, Nebraska 33, Illinois 36, Iowa 38, Indiana 39. How many freaking teams are they going to get in the
probably 10 or more.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's going to be weird. But my mind will still be working like, oh, USC's in there? They're not Big Ten. That's the way it's going to take a while for it to sink in. But we're going to see in this tournament how much the Power Four really control this. And then the changes to the NIT. And then this crown tournament thing they got going on in Las Vegas. You've heard about that thing, right? Which is like, I think it's the Big East, the Big 12, and the Big 10. Teams that don't make it into the NCAA, they're going to try to take them away from the NIT. It's like a 5-day tournament in Las Vegas. Single elimination, 16 teams from those 3 Power 4 conferences.
And it makes sense in some ways,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, no offense to the NIT all the years, but when the second or third best team from the Valley plays at Iowa, or Stony Brook plays at Iowa, and some years it's great. You know, we've seen it with the men where I remember, I think it was the year when they went to the finals, went out to New York,
Yeah.
and you know they had Stony Brook and they played really well, or Dayton and Fran's second year. It was sold out and crazy environment and stuff. That's different than last year. It was, you know, first round they had like 4,400 people show up, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I think the women are kind of in the same boat, but I think going to Vegas is the right move. I mean, teams like this want to play teams of somewhat equal stature. It's and it's no offense again to the Valley or whatever, but if you're Iowa and you don't make the tournament, but Oklahoma State doesn't make the tournament, you'd probably rather play Oklahoma State than Tulsa. It's just, you know, doesn't matter. Tulsa won 22 games, Oklahoma State won 18 or whatever. I'm just throwing names out there. That's the type of scenario that teams want to play. And the power conferences have decided that Fox is smart enough to figure it out. And
you think about it, it's kind of, Scott, like a conference tournament.
Yeah.
16 teams.
Mhm.
That's what the Big Ten has, right? This year? Or 15?
18. Well, 15 go to the tournament.
15 go to the tournament. So one more than that. You don't have buys and things like that, but you're giving somebody 5 days of, 16 teams to the championship. I kind of like it. It's different than, because you're watching NIT, you watch Stony Brook and then Iowa doesn't play again for another 5, 6, 7 days. And you're like, oh yeah, they're in the NIT. Big what?
Yeah.
If they're in a tournament where they're playing every day like that in Vegas and make a run to the championship, that's excitement. That can build excitement for your program.
For sure. And it's in a different environment, because when you are held out, and especially if you're a bubble team or you're close to it, even last year, Iowa knew it wasn't getting in, but Iowa knew it was getting in the NIT. Players have a tendency to just opt out mentally. And again, it depends on the team and it depends on the player. Last year they did, mentally they were zonked. Years past they weren't. But if you're going to go to Vegas, that's kind of different. That's kind of cool. That's like, hey, all right, you're going out there and you're playing ball, and then what are you doing outside of ball? That's the other cool part.
Catching a shell, Celine Dion.
Yeah, but instead of I don't think they're going to Celine Dion. I can guarantee that one. But
maybe Fran would. You think Fran likes Celine Dion?
No, but I bet he may check out Wayne Newton.
Yeah, could do that. A little Donkey Shane.
Yeah, there you go. But you think about it, it's like, all right, our bubble burst. Tuesday we've got Southern Illinois at home, and then you don't play again until Sunday afternoon, and it's your spring break, and you're
competing with the NCAA tournament on a lot of those nights.
Yeah, and it's like you're like, well, yeah, and it's my spring break, and I'm stuck in Iowa City practicing. Our season's over. We're not going to go to the NCAA, so it's like, who the hell cares? I don't care. But now at least you get kind of a spring break. I don't know what week it is. Is it right the week after the season, or is it?
It's the end of March through like April 4th or 5th, like that. It's like March 31st through April 5th.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's a little bit of a gap, but I think they want to make sure they have time to organize it after, because I don't think anybody's sure what the competition, for lack of a better term, will be if between like the Crown and the NIT. Like, how does a school decide which one it wants to go to? And I don't know. Is that just because the NCAA doesn't really? Do they still have much input on the NIT? I thought I remember them being less involved in that now.
I haven't paid as much attention to it.
I think I read that recently, but yeah, the NIT is, I don't know, they need to restructure that thing or do something different. And I know this year they're making it more Power 4 oriented, and maybe that helps. But again, like Scott said, with this, like the NCAA tournament is the CFP. If you're in that, you're playing for the big prize. If you're in the Music City Bowl, you're in the NIT. And which programs are invested in those types of bowls and what type teams are not. And you get the same thing with the NIT. Do we want to be here or do we not want to be here? And as you were saying a minute ago, maybe they don't want to be there on their spring break. So
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see how it shakes out, that breakdown between the NIT and if the Crown's able to make some headway there and actually put a good event together.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that, one thing I took away from when I worked in Missouri for 6 years in prep basketball was their prep basketball layout is superior in season to what we do in Iowa, to what other people do. I mean, they have, like, you could play up to 3 in-season tournaments. I always thought that would be great. In college basketball, you have the tournaments around Thanksgiving and you have them around Christmas, but you don't have anything like from January onward. And I always thought that when, like, in prep basketball in Missouri, all of a sudden they'd have the Cameron Classic or something like that. It was a week long, boys and girls. They'd play games, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday would be girls, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday would be boys, and you'd play each other through the whole week, and you'd get different teams from different conferences. And I always think tournaments like that kind of energize the season, energize people. And so I would love to see, let's say, take this week right now of the season of basketball, instead of regular season, if you had the Kansas City Classic, and all of a sudden, for, let's say, men's basketball, and you had Iowa and Kansas and Arkansas and Colorado State or Drake, or and a bunch of teams that could play in this tournament, especially as leagues get bigger. Then you can have teams from the same conference play, in these things, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got 3 games over 5 days, and therefore, they're playing one another, and then you're playing for 8th place or whatever. And so that's why I like the idea of this postseason, because it's going to take 5 wins to win the NIT, and you're playing 3 of them on home sites, and you're dragging it out. It can get real blah.
And you can go geographic early.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a lot more complicated
Mm-hmm.
for those 3 games you're talking about on campuses.
Right. But if they were to say, if you're the NIT, and this is what I would do if I was the NIT, if you're still going to do 32 teams and you want to combat that, is why don't we go to one site Tuesday, Wednesday, the first week? So you get 2 games. And then the next week it's, Sunday, Monday, or it's something like that. Maybe it's 1 game and then 2 games at the next site, or something like that, where you can just get teams more games in and out quicker, and do it opposite and not go head to head with the NCAA tournament. I don't know. I'm just talking out of my way.
Well, and I think it would save money. It's more, logistically, it's easier for everybody.
Yeah. Instead, let's keep, each place has its own crowd, and yeah. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure people could say, no, I like it the way it is, and they're not wrong either. I'm just throwing out different ideas.
Yeah, it's complicated. It is, and I think everybody's always looking at ways to make more money, and the avenues to do that. And we'll see how this Crown thing works out, and if that's something that ends up being something, so to speak. But finishing up with women's basketball, and then we'll take a break, Scott. As we said, USC on Sunday, then next week. Actually, not next week. Next Thursday is at Minnesota. As I said, ahead of Iowa in the net rankings, and then at Nebraska a week from this coming Monday. So 4 and 6, what's got to happen here, man? Do they have to win 2 of these 3?
I think you got to look at the schedule as a whole and say, and I was going into this with the Northwestern game, and there were 9 games left. Now there's 8. Out of those 8 games, you figure there's 2 you have to win, Rutgers and Wisconsin, because you're better than they are. Mm-hmm. You can't really leave any room for, those are killers.
Yeah, your margin for error is gone now.
Right. And that gets you to 6 wins in the Big Ten. That's not good, but it gets you in the conversation. But what you do with the other 6 games is what's going to get you in the tournament. And I think a combination of, like, to me, they're like out of those other 6, 3 of them are, it would take your best effort of the season to win. USC, UCLA, and at Ohio State. I think they're all 3 better than Iowa, and all 3 could beat Iowa decisively unless Iowa plays really well. And frankly, they play a little less well. They don't play
Yeah,
very
they
well.
need, I mean, it's got to be so much better than they played the other night against Northwestern. And
Yeah.
again, Northwestern played well, target on the back, all that stuff. When you're playing those teams that you're talking about, none of that shit matters.
You got to play like you did against Washington.
Yep.
And they're capable of it, and let's say Juju Watkins getting some foul trouble, or, and she scores only 20, something like that. But, UCLA presents even more challenges, with
Yeah.
Kiki Rice and Lauren Betts, and Ohio State, from, a perspective that they do hate Iowa. That I've been told that several times, that is the team they hate the most.
They're 2 of the most successful programs in the Big Ten history,
Yeah,
Iowa
exactly.
and Ohio State. That shit goes back to the 90s. Katie
Yeah.
Smith and those people. That it runs deep.
Exactly. And so it's understandable,
Yep.
but then there are 3 other games that I think are not only gettable. Unfortunately, they're all 3 on the road.
Yeah.
But if Iowa could win, Iowa needs, out of those 3 games in the Big Ten tournament, I think they need at least 2 more wins, if not 3, to get into the tournament. At Minnesota, at Nebraska, and at Michigan. Now, Michigan lost to Wisconsin last night. Iowa should have beaten Nebraska at home. There's, at Minnesota. Minnesota is a much improved team this year, and they're not going to be easy. But I think if Iowa plays well, Iowa can win 1, 2, 3 of those games. I think Iowa has to win at least 1 to put itself in that conversation. If they go 7-11 in the Big Ten, that would be 3 more wins this year. Puts them at, 16 and I don't know, whatever. But their net is so high. And then if they win a game in the tournament, then they're at 17 wins. That's the type of season. It's still Iowa. Name recognition does matter.
Yep.
Iowa beat Iowa State. You have those types of things. I think the Hawkeyes would sneak in probably, to get to another site, because, in the business side of things, Iowa still sells.
Oh yeah.
People still travel, and would they be better off having Iowa as an 11 or a 12 seed at some place than
Yes.
having another team? Yes. So I
Yep.
think, but they have to do it too. You can't just grandfather. It's just more of a matter of this team, that team. Well, I'd rather have the team that we know, has some star power. TV, people still watch them on TV, and of course, people travel to see them.
Yeah, they're at the point now where they need some good wins and can't have any bad losses. Those are 2 things that have to happen here with the rest of the regular season, and they'll likely have to do some damage in the Big Ten tournament too. But great league, and there'll be opportunities for them throughout, including Sunday, and then the 2 road games. The next 3 games are incredibly big opportunities for them. So we'll see how they do, and we'll certainly talk about that moving forward. Wrap up with Caitlin doing Caitlin things and donating 22K to Iowa charities in conjunction with her ceremony and retirement on Sunday. It's going to be, sure, it'll be emotional. It'll be a historical moment, all of those things for Hawkeyes and Hawkeye history. So, yeah, she's, it's, excuse me, she's amazing. She just continues to do good things, even beyond basketball, and she's a special person.
Yeah, she's, really the most popular. You could make a case she's the most popular athlete on the planet right now. I mean, Time Magazine called her Athlete of the Year as a WNBA rookie, and as her impact on women's college basketball and women's sports is profound. It's transcendent. And we've talked about it before. We've seen it before. Everybody else has seen it too. but she is still in a lot of sports. I mean, we haven't heard anything from MLB guys since the World Series is over with, but Caitlin Clark's still in the news each and every, not just because of this coming up, but hanging out at Taylor Swift. I mean, you didn't see, hey, there's somebody from the New York Yankees at a game,
Yeah.
but you have in the, in a Kansas City Chiefs game, there she is. And, but, giving back, she's going to always do that.
Actually, didn't she go? She shows up at like, she's very supportive of women's sports in general, showing up women's soccer, women's volleyball. Uh, I remember she, met up with the Olympians, you know, is it Gabby Thomas,
Yeah.
the sprinter? I mean, and what's her name, the gymnast? Why am I forgetting that now?
Simone Biles.
Yeah. I mean, and she's constantly trying to support and lift up female athletics. And she doesn't take for granted the power she has in doing that. And she follows through. A lot of people talk about it, but she actually
Yeah.
does it.
Yeah. It's remarkable in so many ways. She's a special person. She's somebody that her impact will, go well beyond her basketball playing prowess, which I expect to last a long time. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if she becomes the first billionaire female athlete, kind of with an enterprise like a LeBron James. I mean, she just has that kind of impact. And
I think she'll I see kind of parallels later on just in taking women's female athletics to the next level, kind of like Billie Jean King is now, where she's revered for what she did for women's sports. And I think Caitlin's kind of getting in and now with the opportunity there to take it to the next level. I think she's going to be remembered like Billie Jean King in the future, but even more popular because she's helping lift the popularity.
yeah, I just hope that a lot of the WNBA establishment respects that at some point soon.
Yeah.
They're rebelling against their progress.
Yeah, that will never make sense to me.
It's instead of embracing this goose that just spits out golden eggs for everybody, it's like, no, it's, we're getting gold because, you're getting it because of her. Come on, admit it.
Yes.
I know maybe they're better players and your history is there, but you just can't. The obvious is Caitlin Clark is the reason why people are watching. Caitlin Clark is the reason why you're on charter aircraft. Caitlin Clark is the reason why you guys are going to get paid more money. Just embrace it. People are watching because of her. She is the tide that lifts all boats. Embrace it. Don't rebel against it. And instead, they just don't want to concede their space to somebody like her. And that needs to change. I think it will at some point, but it's just.
They can't, I mean, they can try to push back, but she's going to keep pushing forward. Yeah. So it's not going to matter. And you're just going to look like an idiot, if you keep pushing back. And you're really going against your own interests. So it makes no sense on multiple levels.
Like the Washington Mystics owner saying that, all the WNBA should have been on the cover.
No.
This is athlete of the year. It's like when, Messi was the athlete of the year before. Should all of MLS be on the? Well, why even make that? It's like the WNBA has been its own fiefdom for so long, and it's had its own culture for so long, and it's isolated, and it's been protected basically by the NBA financially all these years, but it just has this resistance against any kind of outside involvement. And now that all these people are paying attention to it, they want it to be about our fiefdom, not because she brought hers in it. And it's just, but hers will overwhelm it because you can't deny the popularity. I mean, people saying, Juju is going to be way better than Caitlin Clark, or Paige Beckers is way better than Caitlin Clark. Maybe they will be, but you know what Caitlin Clark did? She sold out Northwestern. She sold out every single arena. You know why?
I
Because people
find it
buy.
hard to believe that those women would be way better than Caitlin.
Yeah,
They may be, I think you get who's better, Jordan or LeBron? Who's better?
yeah,
Wilt or Kareem. I mean, those are the arguments that you have. There's no real answer.
yeah,
There's no definitive answer. She's in the discussion. So that's nonsense too. But I'm with you. Hopefully they figure it out, understand it's the golden goose,
yeah,
and embrace and move on and rise with the tide.
yeah, exactly. Because you all want to get paid.
Yeah.
You want to get your shoes. You want to have name recognition. Here's your chance while she's there. And I brought this up last summer. I didn't know or care about somebody like Kelsey Plum until I started watching the WNBA, and then it was like, wow, I like watching Kelsey Plum play. And Aja Wilson, wow, she's really good. I didn't really know or care too much about her either. When my dad in his 70s decides to get the WNBA app to watch these teams play, and the New York Liberty is his favorite team.
We have that in common.
Yeah. But it's crazy. I mean, by the way, I'm just blown away because he never once, still to this day, asked me about Iowa men's basketball. Never when I was going home and away asked me about Iowa men's basketball. But now I'll get texts in the middle of Iowa women's basketball games and the WNBA games, and he and my wife are texting each other about the WNBA games. It's a new world. But that's what Caitlin Clark did.
Yeah.
He likes the Fever, but his favorite team's the Liberty. He would have never experienced that without Caitlin Clark. And that's what they've got to realize, that it's more than just, you know.
Well, like I say, they can resist, but it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop what she's doing, and she's going to keep pushing forward. And it hasn't. I'm sure it affects her on some level because when people do things like this mentally, it impacts you. But she's so mentally strong and focused on what she wants to do in terms of her career and getting better at basketball and all the right things to think about that I don't think whatever impact those words and situations have are going to deter her or slow her down at all. I think she's on a mission straight ahead.
She's so mentally tough. I mean, last year could have broken just about any other athlete with the amount of pressure that she had to perform each and every night. I mean, it was like, um, the greatest athletes understand that this may be the one time that kid or that family
Yeah.
sees me in person and they want the best of me. And she was able to do it on the biggest stage. Hey, she's only X number of points away from breaking Kelsey Plum's record. So what does she do? She drills a 33-foot three-pointer, in the first quarter to do it. I mean, how epic is that? And the NCAA tournament, the biggest stages, she's performed at her highest level. So triple doubles and what have you. And that's her mental toughness. But I will say this, that I think it'll be special for her too, because she has faced such tough circumstances. It's thrown at her and thrust at her at such a young age. It's in the WNBA and all the, whether it was the race issues or what have you, that were thrown in her direction, that to be at her home area where everybody loves her and will give her the kind of reception that she deserves. I think that's going to probably do her soul some good.
She deserves all the flowers around here. She's done a lot for not only the university, but the state and beyond. And she deserves everything coming her way on Sunday. So enjoy it. Hopefully, everybody has a great time. And we'll talk about that next week as well. Let's take a break. Let people know that support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We'll be back in a few minutes to talk some more Hawks. Hang in there. We're back on the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast. Rob Housecott, document from the Athletic. Not enough coffee in the world today. I'm kind of in that mode. So I just got some more to get us to the finish line here. We are back and want to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call when you want the real deal. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. And last but not least, the Black Angel Restaurant downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated. You may have frequented their establishments in the past. El Banditos, Perez Tacos. This will not disappoint you. Your taste buds will be titillated. Can I say that on this podcast? Can I say titillated?
I think that's a good word for this. Yeah.
Live music sometimes on the weekends there, free. So can't go wrong. Black Angel Restaurant downtown Iowa City. Check them out. All right. Thank you to our sponsors. And we're back. Let's go into a little men's basketball. We kind of delved into that a little bit in the previous segment when we talked about the Crown and the NIT. Like the women, the men have a lot of work to do here. And it's going to be a challenge, but the opportunity is there. We've gone back and forth on this, Scott. Like, who has the better chance to get in throughout the month of January? And we've seen that it kind of goes back and forth. I don't know. And I think both are on the wrong side of the bubble and have a lot of work to do and probably will need to deliver some upsets to get there. But all you can ask for is an opportunity. You can't go back and change the past. Iowa certainly has to figure some things out on the men's side, especially on the road. I don't know what. I mean, it just seems like they can't get out of their own way on the road, and they're not themselves. Some things for me, Scott, just observing, and this is on TV more than being there because I don't go to the road games, and I don't think I was at the last couple home games either because, again, things going on professionally. But I digress. I don't know. They seem flat too often when I watch. They just like the energy. The Minnesota game stands out to me. Just they should have been fired up in that game. And then the other night at Ohio State, I saw it again, just kind of flat. I think the guys like each other. I think there's decent chemistry with the players. I just can't put my finger on it. And in terms of the coach and how because I've heard people talk about he doesn't have the fire. He doesn't care, just speculation based on his mannerisms and how he's acting on the sideline. I will say people didn't like when he was a crazy person over there and getting red-faced. And now he's done a complete 180, it almost seems like. At the end of the Ohio State game, I saw him joking around with Sherm when the game was out of hand. I wouldn't have thought he would do that 5-10 years ago. So I don't know all what's going on here, Scott, and I'm just throwing a bunch of stuff out there, but it just feels like a really important time for Iowa men's basketball. And we've talked about that, for the last couple months. It feels different.
Yeah. We know kind of the direction where this is going. And it's just, we're trying to be as fair as we can.
Something has to be done. We agree with that, right?
Yeah,
you can't go like it's unsustainable. You have to have people in your arena.
Right. It's cultural, and the only way you can really change the culture, and I'm not talking about the culture of how they play, because they if we're just talking about strictly on the floor, Rob,
aesthetically.
Yeah. If we're talking about how they play on the floor, over even the last handful of years, that's not something that I would say, needs to change. I would say there are aspects that need to change.
Yes.
Defense, doing some things differently. Yeah, okay, but that's sports. But the culture of what Iowa basketball is, and you've brought it up before, it is a business. And Big Ten basketball is a business. And when your trajectory is, and I'll kind of go through this just briefly, in the last 3 years, they went from, well, last year they had $3.4 million in tickets sold. This year, or
That
last
was
year,
23.
the 23 season,
Okay.
22, 23, 2.9 million this year, or this most recent year. This year in particular, it's got to be way down because, last year the home attendance dipped below 10 at 99. The year before it was 12.3.
What are we at this year? Sold
This,
8.
see here. Sold. Let me go to I had that open here. Here it is. 87.92.
Okay. What were they last year?
Last year 99.61.
Okay. So about 1,000
Yeah,
decrease.
yeah, but this is going to go down. Well, yeah, and this was kind of part of that was also including the NIT game, which was
Yeah.
FUBAR. It was like 4,400 or something like that.
I really wanted to be there, though.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the one thing about the NIT crowds, man. The people that show up to those things are loud because they really want to be there.
Yeah, it's weird because some years it's just raucous, and other years it's just nothing.
Yeah.
But I would expect it to be below 2,500 in tickets, and 2.5 million in tickets, if not closer to 2. And I would expect it to dip below, it's at 87 now. If they continue to lose, I mean, next week is their one chance to kind of crack and move up, playing Purdue and Wisconsin on a midday on a Saturday.
Yeah.
That, on NBC.
And Purdue's a 6 o'clock tip, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So those are good times.
Yeah. And on Peacock, the weather has not been an issue.
Yeah.
That's how you're going to kind of get your juice back a little bit but you have to play well. Excuse me. You have to play well.
It's interesting, isn't it, how the men and women both have like stretches here where it's do or die, it's make or break.
Yeah. Yeah. And in years past, Rob, I mean, Iowa started behind the 8 ball with 0-3, and it's really important. And then they win 3 straight, and then it's back and forth. I mean, after they beat Indiana, it looked like, okay, this team might be trending in the right direction, but then they go to the West Coast and get blown out, play so poorly on defense, especially against UCLA. Then the Minnesota game, which I think was the tipping point as far as fan apathy, but also for the team to go, man, you really lost to Minnesota. Then they beat Penn State by 1, go to Ohio State and get blown out and look bad again. There's not a lot of confidence that I have in this team right now that it can kind of, sack up and get ready. And because in a typical year, I would look at this. Let's say they would have beaten Minnesota and they were 5-5 in the Big Ten, and you're playing Purdue and Wisconsin at home. We probably would say, you know what, they got a chance to split here.
Yeah.
And maybe they still do.
And either one of those wins would be valuable.
Right. But based on what we've seen on the floor itself, it's more of you're hoping, you're wishing, you're grasping at rivalry, and they played so poorly at Wisconsin and they took that to heart, and they, what they said about the defense. You're using different aspects than reality, and that doesn't always translate to the floor, which is they have played so poorly on defense. How are they going to handle Purdue? I don't see it. Now, Wisconsin might be a different animal. If Wisconsin misses some shots, Iowa makes some shots. Maybe, they shot lights out in that game, 21 3-pointers, Big Ten record. They're not going to shoot 22. They're not going to shoot 20. I would go out on a limb and feel safe saying that. But I don't like a lot of what I see intangibly with this team as well. And, and I think this has more of the potential to go off the rails than it does to get back on the right path.
Yeah, I mean, the game against Minnesota and the one at Ohio State within the last week or so did not instill any confidence from us on the outside watching them And, you know, you look at a team and you're like, okay, what is this team? What are its strengths and what are its weaknesses? And we have a clearer picture at this point in the season where it looked earlier in the year like it may be improved defensively. That fool's gold, however you want to frame it, that did not pan out. It doesn't rebound well. And that's
No, it's
part of the
terrible.
reason for that is it's got a small lineup. But then if it goes with a bigger lineup, it doesn't have the same offensive firepower and probably doesn't. I mean, I think you got to play Harding and Thelwell. They're two of your best players, so they need to be out there. But then when you're putting Josh Dix, Peyton Sanford, and Owen Freeman, you're often giving up quite a bit of height and a lot of offensive rebounds, man. And just if you're not a good defensive team as it is, and you're giving other teams more opportunities because you can't rebound, it's just really hard to win.
The worst statistic of them all for them, Rob. I mean, it's not that they're last in field goal percentage defense, and it's not that they're last in scoring defense. It's rebound margin. I think that's way more important to me than rebound numbers. I think rebound margin is the most important one. And number 17 in the Big Ten is Minnesota at minus 0.86 rebounds per game. So that's just like basically losing a rebound more than your opponent. Nothing big. That's 17th. Iowa is minus 5.43.
That's amazing.
That is a gulf. That is a bigger gulf than from basically from 3 to, it's a bigger gulf than 4 to 17 between 17 and 18. That is, if you can't play great defense, you better rebound the basketball. Because if you can't do both, you're not going to win close games. You're not going to beat these teams unless they are missing shots, which is crossing your fingers. And then you get the games like the other night against Ohio State, the Wisconsin game, the UCLA game, hell, even the USC game where they're getting blown out there. That's why on the road you're dead because they have they're playing in their home rims.
They get an offensive rebound, they kick it out to 3, boom, hit a 3-pointer, crowd goes. It's just, it's not good. You can't win.
Yeah, you can't win that way. And I think that when you look at the style of play, it's entertaining the way Iowa plays. I enjoy that aspect of it. I'd much rather see a team win or lose in the 80s than win or lose in the 50s. It's just, it's just, people feel the same way about football too. You'd rather see a team win or lose in the high 20s and 30s versus the teens. Why teams win championships and teams advance in the tournament, and it's because in the critical junctures of the game, they're able to get a stop, and then they're able to turn that into A points or strong possessions. Iowa cannot get those stops. And that's why we're at the position. I mean, whether 13-8, 4-6, they're playing Purdue and Wisconsin, two of the better teams in the league right now. Purdue is they got upset at home by Ohio State. It was the end of their 29-game win streak. And what did they do? They just went out and annihilated Michigan. I expect them to be very focused going forward. And Wisconsin, that to me is their last stand of the season. Because I'll put it out there. I'll be very surprised if they beat Purdue. I think Purdue is a better team than they are, better in all the key areas, and it's going to be a really tough game. You would expect that Wisconsin, again, is their last stand. It's Saturday. It's at noon. I expect a decent crowd. It's a rivalry game. They're playing for the second time. There's going to be fans probably from Wisconsin that come. There's going to be, they remember the comments after giving up, 320 points that day and 400 3-pointers, 21 3-pointers. They remember all that. So they're going to give their best effort. It's going to be at home, a decent crowd. How they perform in that game will tell me whether this season is got any prayer of salvation.
Yeah. And they, have 8 days off after the Ohio State game in Columbus on Monday night. They don't play again until Tuesday, February the 4th against Purdue at 6 o'clock. at Carver Hawkeye Arena. So they have whatever needed to be figured out up to this point needs to be figured out during this prep for next week, because anything beyond a split is a death knell. If you lose both of those games, it's over.
You're 4-8.
Yeah, you're not going to recover from that, especially with the road games left and what else is on the schedule. So split at minimum next week, and they're going to need to do what they've struggled to do this year. And the coaches in the Big Ten are great. They know how to take away certain aspects of what you want to do, and Iowa's faced that as we've gone along in the Big Ten. There are times where they take Josh Dix away. Peyton Sanford's gotten sideways sometimes. They get Freeman in foul trouble at times. It's just guys haven't been consistent. And then as a result, the team hasn't played consistently well. And as we said with the women, Scott, the time we've been saying this the last few weeks, the time is now. The time really is now.
Yeah. Yeah, and and every week, we kind of battle around, who's got a better chance to advance. And I think the one path I see forward for the women is that their net is so much higher, and it's because they played better teams in the non-conference.
Yeah, the men are 65 for the folks out there. The women, what did I say, 38?
Yeah,
I think
38. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a big gap.
Right, and so they can, if they knock off a good team, a team ahead of them, and then they're going to stay in that realm and win the games that they should, then they're going to stay in that fight. The men have a lot of climbing to do. And then you look at the opponents left. I mean, after this week, then they go play Rutgers and Maryland. Well, Rutgers is in a similar situation they are. They have two dynamite freshmen that are capable of, once they get to the point where they show what they're actually going to do, then watch out. I mean, that's a team that's can really take over. They've really underachieved thus far, but they've got two lottery picks, there. At Maryland, maybe, very few teams are playing as well as Maryland right now.
And nobody wins there.
No, it's terrible. It's hard. I mean, Jordan Bohannon had one hell of a game there a few years, well, now more than a few years ago, just dating myself here, but
I was watching a little bit of their game last night against Wisconsin, and they threw up a graphic. I think they're 12-1 at home. They haven't lost in the Big Ten at home, and I think the only loss was Auburn, the number one team in the country at home.
Right.
So yeah, that's a huge challenge for Iowa.
Yeah. So you're looking at a guarantee of one loss, and then depending on what happens at Rutgers, who knows? Oregon and Washington at home. Oregon's ranked. Oregon's good. Washington's not good. That should be a win, but Minnesota should have been a win too. Now, now there's a rivalry history there, and Minnesota hadn't won in Iowa in 10 years, and you kind of sometimes that plays into a factor. Washington hasn't built anything with Iowa that way, but still, it's a game. Going to Illinois, I'm not even going to play around with that. Going to Northwestern, they won on last second shot the first time. I'm sure Northwestern probably feel like this is a game we could get and keep us alive for any kind of postseason opportunities. Michigan State at home, that one, you play really, really well, maybe you have a chance. Michigan State's, undefeated, of course, in the Big Ten and looks really good, but they also haven't, some of their numbers aren't great. And a lot of times it's, they haven't played a lot of great competition either. And then you wrap up at Nebraska, kind of like the Northwestern situation. You rallied, miracle rally to come back from 15 down to win in overtime.
Yeah.
So, this team's maybe closer to 2-8 than it is to the 5-5 or 6-4. So
I look at that schedule you ran off, Scott, and I obviously don't, this is speculation and just kind of somewhat guessing on what could happen, but I think Washington might be the only game where they're favored.
Yeah.
Maybe at Northwestern, maybe depending on what happens between now and then, maybe at Rutgers, but I would think not. Maybe Oregon at home, but I don't see that. So yeah, it's up against it.
And when you start to look at the very, very end, Rob, the Northwestern and Nebraska games are going to be really impactful, and Rutgers too, as to whether Iowa even qualifies for the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah.
You want to put yourself at least in that position, because there's 18 teams and only 15 get to go. And they're 4-6. Rutgers is 4-6, Northwestern 3-7, Nebraska 2-7. I think Iowa broke Nebraska by coming back.
They were playing well when they came here.
Yeah, and then they've lost 6 straight. Washington's lost 6 straight. That, I would say out of that group, I think being objective, 3 wins is probably where I would put them at. That they beat Washington, they sneak a road win, and then they, maybe they upset somebody along the way, Wisconsin, or maybe another road win.
7-13.
Yeah. So that'll get them in the Indy. I don't, and if that will get
and you know what you got to do when you get there. In that case, win the whole day.
It won't be. Yeah, I think it's more like, hey, let's try to get to Vegas, or what we haven't really mentioned yet is what's next. And that might be where they're at anyway. If they go 3-7 over their final 10, that puts them at 16-15 for the regular season. And they get to Indy and they go 16-16. They're probably not. Maybe they would get invited to some tournament, but it might be that time where they said, we're gonna look at what's next. But
yeah, and we'll get to that. I thought about talking about that more today, but I wanted to focus more on what the team is doing right now and the outlook for what lies ahead. But yeah, definitely this is going to be part of the conversation. As we've said, excuse me, it's not sustainable. You can't have an empty arena. So something has to be done. You can't just let it go like this. And it's more about, if you beat Purdue and Wisconsin at home next week, that will ignite. You hope the next home game, you would hope that would engage more people. But I just think coming back from where they are now completely in terms of getting support, it's just hard for me to find a path right there right now without a major investment and major decisions made in regard to this program. And that's kind of where we'll leave that for now, and then we'll see, because I think this is going to be a storyline all the way into the spring, which is not breaking news.
Yeah.
You want to add anything before we move on?
I just want to say, they've lost 4 out of the last 5. So that's difficult to come back from as a program on the floor, and for a fan base that was apathetic and waning to begin with, to really reinvest mentally as much as anything.
Yeah, we'll monitor the situation moving forward as we always do. Iowa men's basketball, no game this week, will not be in action again until Tuesday night, February the 4th, 6 p.m. against Purdue. That's on Peacock and in Carver Hawkeye Arena. And then, as we said, the women, Sunday, Caitlin Clark retirement, USC, Juju Watkins, big deal. Big deal tonight, Scott. I will preface this by saying Scott and I are not wrestling aficionados. We follow it, but not as closely as we do other sports. But obviously, an enormous duel tonight in State College, Pennsylvania. Tomorrow night. Sorry. Yeah. Friday night, 6 p.m., Big Ten Network. It is number 2 Iowa at number 1 Penn State. And these are the 2 premier programs in the country, Scott. And really, at this point, is how much has Iowa closed the gap on Penn State with the additions in the transfer portal and the maturity of some of the athletes that were still in the program? And how much has Penn State come back to the pack, if at all? And we get those answers, at least the first data on those answers on Friday night. And then I do know this, and wrestling fans, obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but more for the novices. Just because Iowa loses a duel doesn't mean it can't win in a tournament format, being like the Big Ten or the NCAAs. but we got to see what they have in comparison to Penn State on Friday night, and that gives us the first look at what might happen in March.
Yeah, this is totally I mean, this is what you measure yourself against. If you're Iowa, and Penn State does the same thing, although
It's Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah,
It's Duke and North Carolina.
yeah,
Right. It's Penn State and Iowa.
yeah. I mean, these teams, these programs are not fond of one another, but they are the highest level. And
I like how you put that gently. They're not fond of each other.
yeah, I think I'm fair on that one.
And
But
Gabe Arnold did a nice job igniting things the other day.
yeah, right. You know,
I wonder what type of discussion was had with Gabe after that.
uh, uh, knowing who his opponent is, I'm not so sure what the rationale for that was, but maybe he feels like that's what he's got to say, to get
Yeah.
himself fired up. And if you do, then you do. But I mean, imagine that they decide, oh, we're going to go with Ferrari instead. Just because.
Well, that was kind of Sriracha hit him with a
Yeah.
who is that? Kind of one of those things. Who are you? With
Mhm.
is he because
Yeah.
he acted like he didn't know who was wrestling at that
Right.
weight for Iowa. He thought it was Ferrari, which Scott just mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you're Starachi, you can say that, you've only won 4 straight national titles. So,
Yeah.
you know,
He's got a bit of a track record.
yeah, it's one of those where you can say that about anybody,
Yeah.
because you're proven to be the best in the world, or at least in your weight class in this country. But this is, as we know, it's always going to be an uphill climb when you look and you see their rankings, and they're in the top 3 and what 8 of the or top 4 in 8 of the 10
8 of the 10, yeah.
yeah, top 10 in all of them.
Yeah.
Iowa's got some pretty good athletes, but there's some in a few positions where you're just like, you got to hold on, only
It's one of those things, right? The where Iowa has advantages, you got to get bonus points.
Yeah.
And you can't give up bonus points in some of those matches where you're probably not going to win.
Right. I mean, like 57 is going to be a toss up. You've got you got to hope for Drake Ayala to be healthy, and then not only be healthy but pull out a big win, a major or more. You've got to hope for guys that are going, like Ben Keeter has been good but has lost a couple of matches. Going to get Kirk Follett, he lost to him last year. You've got to go in. Those are the types of matches where not only do you hope to win or hope to compete, but you got to win a couple of these matches too. You've got to make sure that you're on a similar wavelength with these guys. And I was going to go in there with a warrior mentality, but I don't know if it's going to be enough. I mean, Penn State is Penn State. They're the best, and until you beat them, they're the best. And they have enough wrestlers there who are elite. You look at 74. Patrick Kennedy's had a really nice career. He's 6th in the country, but Levi Haynes is 2nd. So that's a match where you got to hope to win 3-2 or 4-3 or 5-4 or something like that.
A match where you really need your transfer portal guys to come through, because that's why you brought them in for this.
Yeah, I mean, like Stephen Buchanan, is he's number 1 in the country at 97. Well, he's going against Josh Barr, who's 4th. So
yeah,
he's younger too. He's a redshirt freshman, so you'd hope your grad transfer pulls it out, but they got a young, talented guy, and you never know. So it's going to be a challenge, I think, for Iowa to win. But I think you also, as you said, it doesn't have anything no bearing on the NCAA tournament, but it does show you it gives you a snapshot of where you are and where you need to be.
And we'll get that Friday night, January the 31st, State College, 6 p.m. Central Time, and that's on the Big Ten Network. Moving along here to keep this puppy rolling, we're going to finish up with some football recruiting. Going back to my roots a little bit here, but good news. There was a junior day on Saturday at Iowa. The junior days are happening all over the country now, and coaches hitting up high schools. You see pictures of PJ Fleck in Des Moines and all good stuff going on now. But Iowa was able to add to its 2026 class. And for those that don't want to do the those are high school juniors this year. So they will not sign until December of this year. But kind of giving you guys just kind of the trends right now. For Iowa, it's usually most of the, and I'll use a Haydenism here, most of the hay is in the barn on a given prep class by the end of the summer before they sign their national letters of intent. So basically, they have camps and tailgates and junior days and stuff in June and then into July. And then by the time they get into their season, they hope to have most of this class that Scott and I are about to discuss in the fold. And they are up now to 6 recruits in the cycle. 4 of them are offensive linemen. Do I have that right? Yeah, 4 of them offensive linemen. We'll talk about the 2 that aren't, and that's Marcelo Vitti from Divine Child in Dearborn, Michigan. He is a safety and a damn good one. And then Cash Herrera, the quarterback from La Jolla, California. The offensive lineman who got this class started, Carson Nielsen from Waterloo West. He is a 4-star and like him a lot. Owen Linder was next in. He is from Minnesota, 6'5", 280. Very good offers from him as well. Locally, Colin Witters, who I have seen for the last 3 years play, so I probably have the most insight on him, from Iowa City West. And then last but not least, Hudson Parliament from South Dakota, a kid they've been on for a long time. And I have to think they are ecstatic with being able to close the deal with him because they had plenty of competition for him.
Yeah. Parliament was the one that you out of this last weekend that you got. That, I mean, no offense to Witters or Linder, they can turn out to be great too, but
there is photos of Witters with like a baby bottle at Kinnick Stadium with Hawkeye gear on.
Yeah.
So there was a chance. They had a pretty good shot with him.
Right.
And he's on the same offensive line as the Iowa offensive line coach's son.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some connections. Yeah. But I would say Parliament is the one that, had the highest profile. And he's the one that I think he and Nielsen right now are like the 2 that, and Vitti, I think is pretty high profile as well. But you got 2 high prospects on the offensive line, 2 guys that you feel like have a chance to grow with the program. And I know that they're still kind of looking at possibly adding 1 more on the offensive line, just kind of depends. But the guts of this class is pretty good. Now they got to focus on the other side of the ball and some of the other positions. But this is really, to me, this is where recruiting is going to get interesting. How much of it do they go all in with freshmen versus how much do you hold back because there's, because of, the portal, that sort of thing. That's
interesting though, isn't it, Scott? Because you saw what Ohio State did with its offensive line year, this year. Not everybody can do that, but what's the percentage of, as you're saying, do you go, because they've got 4 prep offensive linemen in this class. That's probably going to be among the most in the country because a lot of teams want that quick fix, go in the portal, especially in the trenches.
Yeah.
Those are where it's for the most part, it's going to take year, 2, 3 years, if you're not Tristan Wirfs, to get on the field.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but this is where Iowa, it needed to improve.
Yes.
And it thinks it's in a good spot now. I'll say that I think
offensive line wise.
Offensive line wise, they knew that they whiffed pretty hard for a few years there. And they had some guys who didn't pan out. They had some guys who injuries cost them, other aspects of the mental, that sort of thing really hurt them. But they think they finally have got themselves into that position to where the starters are in a good level. The younger backups are starting to work their way into being, this year there's a couple more that'll work their way into being that rotational, the 6-7 guys, let's look at the lineup for what it is today. When you've got Bo Stevens coming back at guard, Logan Jones, Jennings Dunker. Those are your three starters returning. Then you figure at a guard spot, Cade Peeper is in that competition. Mike Maslinski, could be that good story that comes on. And then on the outside, Trevor Lau, is he going to take that step forward, or are they going to, bite the bullet and ask for more money and get somebody in the portal for it? And then maybe Lau is in competition for a guard spot. And then there's others that, Cale Bowrud, we didn't really see it all last year. Will Nolan, Bodie McCausland, Cody Fox, how do they progress their first full year in that, salt mine, of winter conditioning and stuff.
Yeah.
And how do they grow? And if they can take those steps forward, maybe one of them, maybe a Cody Fox, rotates with Bo Stevens. That would be an ideal situation, or at least gets in a couple series a game. Will Nolan, does he make the two deep? Maybe Bodie McCausland makes the two deep. Josh Janowski or Leighton Jones, they kind of battle for second team reps. So Jack Doetzler, same deal. I think they feel like they're in a healthier spot, that there are fewer whiffs, if you will, than maybe what there were a few years ago. And then you look at these guys, and Carter Nielsen, to me, he's got that profile of, as a redshirt freshman, he's at least a second teamer.
Yeah.
Maybe he's battling for reps. Maybe he's rotating somewhere on the outside. Hudson Parliament, kind of same deal, that you feel like year two, he could be in competition. I think Cody Fox is in that area now. So I like, but my point is, with the whole portal situation, is if you can fortify your offensive and defensive lines, both of them, without dipping too often into the portal, you feel like you can keep them together, because they form such a bond at Iowa and everywhere else that they're not going to look around. If you say, hey, we love you, you build this bond together, and they start and they grow together, then the only competition you're really going to have is, if you pay them, which they will, is NFL. And that's why I like this philosophy, that maybe you supplement, maybe you go, a couple of years ago, they went out and got our guy, Redbeard,
Rusty.
Yeah. Or guys that, hey, I want to come to you, which Proctor was sort of that way. But, otherwise, if you build it yourself, you're in a much better position, because don't you
kind of have to do that at Iowa anyway? I mean, obviously the house sentiment will level the playing field a little bit more, but you really still need to be a developmental program and supplement with transfer portal. You're not going to be able to just throw money, after money to do what Ohio State did on its offensive line. And that's just get the best of the best. And you don't even need chemistry or continuity. In that case, you just put, NFL guys in there and against college kids, and you're going to be successful.
And Ohio State was really lucky this year, because two of their guys that they threw a ton of money at, Seth McLaughlin and Josh Simmons, are out for the season.
Yeah.
But where they're different than everybody else is, oh, damn, we got to throw a 4-star out there. Somebody like Carson Hinsman, who Iowa was in on and Wisconsin was in on. He ends up at Ohio State. He was their 6th offensive lineman after starting last year. And then, oh, by the way, he's starting the center, and helps them go to the championship.
Yeah.
And then, and Donovan Jackson kicks outside from guard. They're able to do that. Iowa is not able to do that. Iowa would not be able to sustain, Logan, like next year. If you go Logan Jones and Jennings Dunker aren't going to be able to play for the end of the season, that team's not going to the playoffs. They just don't have the backups to be able to do it. So, I think Iowa is much better. And we talked about it with quarterback. You can't go out in free agency every year. You've got to, because first of all, you get a lower return on investment, or lower money early, I should say, that, you're paying somebody to, like a Jimmy Sullivan. If this year he redshirts and next year he wins the starting job and he's good, then you're paying him from that point, versus bringing in Mark Gronowski and paying him a lot right away.
Yeah, I think Scott's main point here is that the offensive line that we were really concerned about before last season, but even more before that, I think we had some hope going into this past season because of the experience that they would be able to take the next step forward, and they did. It wasn't a given, but they were able to do that. But a couple years ago, it was rough, and it feels like now they're getting their feet back under them. They're getting guys in there and developing them, and that's like we said, you have to do that here. Whether it's the offensive line, the defensive line, linebacker, any position. Quarterback's a little bit different of an animal, but I think ideally I would like to hope that Granoski is, a guy that can raise the profile of the position at Iowa, make it more attractive to prospects, so you can build on that and make that position healthier as you have with the offensive line. Did I make any sense there?
Yeah, you did. And I think, and this has been the Achilles heel of Iowa for several years, is they've not been a pass friendly offense to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Second of all, you haven't been able to keep any quarterbacks. Since Nate Stanley, we brought this up, and I'm going to continue to bring it up. Every single quarterback they recruited as freshmen left via the portal, including Petrus at the end. Then 3 other quarterbacks you brought in have left through the portal. Deacon Hill and Polsky, which was walk on, but and of course Cade. You have that attrition is not healthy at all. It's not healthy to build. You didn't have like a Deuce Hogan stay 3 or 4 years and start, that you thought you were going to come in. You didn't have anybody like that. So they need to produce ready-made guys that cost a lot of money to put in that position. Next year, you're gonna have to cross your fingers and hope somebody like Jimmy Sullivan, maybe Hank Brown's still pretty young.
Yep.
Ryan Fitzgerald, I'm not gonna sniff on that one. I mean, MAC schools want him. He's a competitor. He's a winner in high school at a very prestigious college, and of course his bloodline. We all know that. He's coming in to compete, and there's no, I'm not going to just shoot that down. So I think if Iowa can find a way to keep its own and supplement through the portal, it'll continue to be a very, very healthy program. And it is a healthy program competitively. It's, 11th among Power 5 conference teams over the last 10 years in wins. But that said, it can fall apart very quickly too in football.
Good sign though that the 26 class is off to a good start. You always want to do that. It's not even February yet. They've got 6 in there, 6 that they really wanted, and other targets that were here this past weekend. They're going to be bringing guys through again. Moving forward here, more junior days, spring practice guys will be coming through. So this will be we'll watch this class form now here over the next several months. Through June and all that, and then we'll talk about it. But good start so far. Got the offensive line pretty much taken care of. Scott said if it's the right guy, they'd probably add another, make it 5. But offensive line looking up with this class, and we'll keep track of what they're able to do beyond that. Obviously, you would like to see some receivers maybe added to help supplement and get that position healthy. But first things first, we'll get it going with the guys up front and go from there. But I think we got to everything, Scott. Anything else good going on the Athletic you want to? I know people should read that Caitlin Clark impact story. Anything else you got going?
Yeah. Today I wrote about Mick Cronin and his constant complaining. I wrote a column.
It's funny. Catherine and I and the kids were watching him the other night. Just, he's nuts.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
He is. And his complaining about how college basketball sold its soul, to TV and all that stuff. Well, I went to the numbers on this one, Rob. And over the last 5 years, when you remove the COVID year, I'm not even going to say, I'm going to make it the last 4 over 5 years. UCLA men's basketball has lost a total of $800,000. If you look over the same period, removing the COVID year, Illinois basketball has made $51 million. You're in the athletic department there over the last 4+ years has lost $200 million. So if there's a school that needed to sell its soul, it's UCLA. I would quit bitching about it, frankly. It's unbecoming. And then worrying about, talking to he complained about the travel and all this stuff and how bad it is. And come on, man. I mean, you're on a chartered aircraft. He complained about seeing the Statue of Liberty twice. Well, one of those was the CBS Sports Classic against North Carolina. I don't want to hear about that. If it travels too much, go play Cal or Stanford. You don't play them anymore. They're in your own state.
Yeah.
So I wrote about that. And then tomorrow, Antonio Morales and we put together our look at the portal of all 18 Big Ten teams
Cool.
and who's rising, falling, and in neutral. And so 6 teams landed in each, and Iowa did fairly well, I would say, in this situation because of Mark Gronowski. I think that's a huge lift.
Good tease there. Check out Scott's work at theathletic.com and or subscribe to The Athletic anyway, even if you don't like Scott, because they've got a lot of good stuff there. But you should like Scott.
Yeah, well,
I like Scott.
I like you too, Rob.
And I'll talk to him more, but not on this podcast. We're about to sign off here. So appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. We'll have a great weekend here. Enjoy the competition. Some good stuff going on Iowa-wise this weekend with Iowa Penn State wrestling. Iowa also wrestles at number 25 Maryland on Sunday. I should mention that. And Iowa women on Sunday against USC in the Caitlin Clark ceremony. Enjoy that as well. And Scott and I will be back to talk to you next week on the Hotspot podcast. Be well. Talk to you soon. Say goodbye, Scott.